Hi, it's Steph, and we're at Lowe's, and they've just received a huge shipment of trees, shrubs, perennials, and annuals. So let's go ahead and take a look at the late March inventory at Lowe's. Let's start with some perennials because at this point we all need some color in our lives. And these are gorgeous hellebore. They're such a beautiful perennial. They bloom earlier than any other perennial in my garden. They usually start late winter, early spring. Mine bloom in March in my zone 6B, 7A. And they are deer and rabbit resistant, extremely cold tolerant, and I don't think that anything bothers these. Now they have these large leathery leaves which are also really beautiful. And this variety in particular is unique because the leaves are variegated. And that's what I actually really liked about them and what drew me to this variety last year when I saw them here. And because these are so large, they serve as a ground cover. And they are evergreen, which means they stay like this all year round. So even when the plant's not in bloom, you have a beautiful tuft of this large green foliage. It does start to get a little tattered at the end of the winter, and you would just follow that stem down, cut it at the base, and it'll push out new foliage. But the good news is that just when the foliage starts looking bad, it's time to cut it back and enjoy the blooms. The bumblebees love it, so it is an early source of pollen for our pollinator friends. Now they do take quite a while to get up to the size that you see here. From seed, they take about 3 to 4 years to get to this size. And they are difficult to start from seed, which is why the plants usually come at a little bit of a premium. So these are by Monrovia. They're $24.98, and the variety is the Frost Kiss Penny Pink Lenten Rose. It likes part sun to shade in a moist but well-draining soil. It is perennial. It is deer resistant and extreme cold hardy. So it is hardy down to -10 degrees Fahrenheit, blooms winter and spring, and it gets to be about 18 to 24 inches in height and in width. Such gorgeous perennials. And another early spring bloomer, Dianthus. This variety is called Kahori, which is a really pretty hot pink color. It looks like a neat little mound of this grassy texture, and then it will shoot up all of these little blooms. And when it's in full bloom, it is so pretty. You get this large mound of these little flowers, and when they're done, they're pretty easy to just shear back, and you don't have to be too careful. Just cut it back as best you can, and then they'll reflush with a second flush of blooms. So really easy care. It likes full sun, and it is hardy down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. It gets to be only 12 to 15 inches in height and in width. And good to see that the perennials are the same price as last year at $8.98. Here is another variety of Dianthus. This one is called Everlast Red and Pink, and these are $5.48 in their quart-size containers. But look at that. The flower is almost like a red with a splash of pink on them. The foliage is also a little bit different. It has more of a blue green coloring instead of just the straight green. And it is hardy down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. Also a little more compact at 8 to 12 inches in height and 10 to 14 inches in width. And they like full sun. And a beautiful primrose that I actually bought myself last year to use in some spring containers. I planted them out in the landscape, and I'm really hoping they return for me this year because they are listed as a perennial. So they have this mounding tuft of large foliage in green that you see there, and then they send up these stalks or these stems with these really pretty deep violet colored blooms with a yellow center. Really pretty. Now usually with primula, they're pretty low growing, and even the flowers are barely just above the tuft of foliage, but this one gets a bit taller, which is what drew me to it in the first place. It gets to be, it says 6 inches in height and 8 to 10 inches in width, and it likes full sun, hardy down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. This is the Crescendo Blue Primrose. And some Saxifraga. Every year I see these sold here at Lowe's, and typically they're in a shade of pink. Well, this variety is called Turon Deep Red Saxifraga. These are $5.98 in a quart-size container. It has them listed as liking part sun, and they are perennial. Now these like a very well-draining soil. A lot of people use them in rock garden applications. So that means that they don't need a ton of water, and they would be pretty drought tolerant. Now I did plant mine out in the landscape in an area that's pretty dry. I don't know if it will return because I just planted it last spring, but I will let you know. They are deer resistant, and they're pretty short in stature, 4 to 8 inches in height, 6 to 12 inches in width, hardy down to negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit. And they like part sun. It looks like 3 to 6 hours of morning sun, because morning sun is a bit more gentle than the hot afternoon sun. These also work really great in containers, which is exactly how I used the pink variety with some pansies and violas and some alyssum. They were really, really pretty. Such a sweet little bloom. And creeping phlox, another really great spring bloomer. This is a low-growing ground cover type phlox, and it does just that. It creeps. It grows wider than it does tall. Really great for early spring color. Mine's bloom right alongside some daffodils. They come in so many different colors. They are deer and rabbit resistant and pretty drought tolerant once established. They take some harsh conditions. They're at the top of my driveway right near hot asphalt, and they do fine in return every year. So this one is $5.48. It is the early spring light pink creeping phlox, hardy down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit, very hardy, and it gets to be 6 to 8 inches in height, but 18 to 24 inches in width, and super easy to divide. And let me show you some of the colors that they have. So this light pink, they also come in a very light purple, which is what I have, and they come in this fuchsia color that they have here, and I've even seen them in white. And some sweet violas. So if you are looking forward to making some spring containers, they have these quart size for $5.48 of the Penny Deep Marina Viola. Really beautiful shades of purple, and look at that sunny little face. So cute. I absolutely love these, and they pair really nicely with Saxifraga because of the different shape, flower, and size bloom. Now it reads them as a perennial, and sometimes violas can be perennial, so it's possible that it returns for you. Hardy down to negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit, and they are short, 6 to 10 inches in height and 6 to 10 inches in width, and they like full sun. They also have some hanging baskets of violas and pansies, 1.5 gallons for $12.98. These are some really pretty deep purple ones with a yellow center, and then they also have some yellow ones. They have really pretty colors of pansies actually, and they have some more of these bicolored varieties as well. And a cherry spring shrub, forsythia. They're just getting ready to bloom here in my zone 6B, 7A. They usually bloom for us in March, a little later this year because we've had such a cold winter. But this variety is by proven winners. It's called Show Off. And this one is, let's see how big, 5 to 6 feet tall and wide, hardy in USDA growing zones 5 through 8 or down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And it likes sun or part shade with very early spring flowers and abundant blooms. That's what it looks like when it's all in bloom. And the Show Off forsythia is in a 1 gallon container for $22.98. And a reblooming azalea by proven winners. Now, if you're familiar with the Encore azalea, which is one that will rebloom throughout the season, this is proven winners version, and it is called the Perfectamundo Double Purple. It's a pretty compact shrub, only getting to be 2.5 to 3 feet tall and wide, and it is hardy in USDA growing zones 6B through 9, or down to negative 5 degrees Fahrenheit. It's reblooming, evergreen, and a spring beauty, and it likes sun and part shade. They have these really pretty glossy green leaves, and you can see that it is all budded up and getting ready to bloom. And these are in a number 2 container for $29.98. Some first edition shrubs, and this one you can tell by the fuzzy little bloom buds here that it's a magnolia, and magnolias are one of my favorite spring blooming trees. And this variety is the Centennial Blush Star Magnolia, and it looks like it has a very light blush pink or white bloom, and it's sort of like a vase-shaped tree. Really pretty. They're also pretty fragrant. I have one called Dr. Merrill that blooms really early for me in April, and it has such an intoxicating fragrance. I absolutely love when it's in bloom. And this one reads, delicate pink flowers cover the entire plant in spring, and the green leaves eventually turn yellow and bronze in autumn. So that's great. And it says it's perfect for small urban gardens. And it gets to be 12 to 18 feet in height, 10 to 15 feet in width, likes full sun, and hardy in zones 4 through 9. And these are in a 2 gallon container for $37.98. Here's a great shrub I have in my own garden. It is the Iceberg Alley Sage Leaf Willow. Now, willows like water, and the reason this is doing so well for me is that I have it planted in an area that stays pretty moist. The soil isn't the best at draining, and this shrub has been so happy. It also has the most gorgeous foliage. It's like a silvery blue color, and it literally looks like sage, hence the name Sage Leaf Willow. And in spring, it'll bloom with these little catkins that will open up. Just a really interesting shrub, and it gets to be 3 to 6 feet in height, 3 to 6 feet in width, and it likes full sun with silver foliage. Hardy in zones 2 through 6. And these are in a 2-gallon container for $27.98. And another plant that can handle moist soils and wet conditions is the dogwood. And this here is the red twig dogwood. And look how vibrant these twigs are. This provides such beautiful winter interest when everything else is bare and drab. You get these bright red sticks. They're also really great for cutting and using in winter or holiday arrangements. And this variety here is just the red twig dogwood. It likes part sun, $21.98 for this container. You can see it's growing on the edge of the water there. And it gets to be 10 feet in height, 10 feet in width. So a pretty good sized shrub. Also really hardy, down to a zone 2 or negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. It doesn't look like much now, but in a few weeks, this is going to be loaded with the most fragrant blooms. A gorgeous spring beauty, the lilac. And this one is the Miss Kim lilac. Now the blooms on this are a little bit lighter. They're like a very light purple, almost white. I actually have one in my garden. It is gorgeous. And the foliage turns a deep burgundy red in the fall. It likes full sun, blooms in spring, $34.98 for this container. It looks about a 2-gallon or so, and it gets to be 6 to 7 feet in height and in width, hardy down to a zone 3 or negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Some more magnolias, and these are in the Lowe's house brand containers for $29.98. They do look to be about a 2-gallon size, and this is the Jane magnolia. Now the Jane and the Anne look very similar. They have these tulip-shaped blooms in a pink with a hint of purple, very pretty. They also bloom in spring. So my white magnolia blooms in April, and my Anne, which is very similar to this Jane, usually blooms in May. So you can keep this bloom show going by having different varieties in your garden. And this variety, the Jane, gets to be 10 to 12 feet in height, 8 to 10 feet in width. And it is hardy down to a zone 4 or negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And what's great about these is, again, they can be grown as a multi-trunk large shrub or even as just a small tree, but they're really beautiful spring bloomers. They also have some really pretty and unique Monrovia shrubs. So Lowe's tends to carry Monrovia, where Home Depot typically carries mostly proven winners and first editions. And so you can see this one here has some really pretty color, even though it's not even blooming yet, right? But what's interesting about this rhododendron is that it is yellow. Look at that. So pretty and unique. It's called Hotai rhododendron. It likes part sun. It's a spring bloomer. It says it's great for woodland gardens. $49.98 for this one. It's an average size and moderate growing, reaching 3 feet tall and slightly wider. And it blooms in spring. It says to keep soil moist but not soggy and hardy down to negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit. What a beauty. And a really cool evergreen that I actually have in my garden. I have 2 of them now. It is the whipcord arborvitae. And I just love how wild it looks. It kind of looks like a fountain, right? In the way that its foliage hangs downward. This is by Monrovia. It's called the Whipcord Western Red Cedar. $47.98 for these. It likes full or part sun, and it's a dramatic accent. And they get to be 4 to 5 feet tall and wide and growing in a natural form. Hardy in zones 5 through 7 or down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. These are super cool evergreens. And another variety of red twig dogwood. These look a little bit more burgundy, but what's interesting about this variety is that it has variegated foliage as opposed to the traditional red twig dogwood that just has green foliage. So this one, the ivory halo dogwood, it likes full or part sun, dramatic foliage, and multi-season beauty because you get the foliage throughout the whole season. It does get blooms, but they're very tiny and insignificant little white clusters. But then you get the winter interest with the twigs. And it is hardy in zones 3 through 7 or down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and it gets to be 5 to 6 feet tall and wide, growing in a rounded, compact form. And speaking of variegated foliage, check out this really pretty shrub. This is a leucothoe, and it is called the rainbow drooping. It likes part sun, it has dramatic foliage and multi-season beauty. $60.98 for these, and they get to be, it looks like, 3 to 5 feet tall and wide and hardy in zones 5 through 9 or down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Look at this foliage. It is gorgeous. And if you like evergreens as much as I like evergreens, this one is a must-have. It's a mugo pine. It grows in a rounded, mounded habit, and in spring, it will push out these gorgeous candles on the tips. And if you want to size control your mugo pines, all you have to do is prune off those candles when they push them out, and that will keep it more compact. They like full sun, they're easy care, multi-season beauty. Evergreens, they look gorgeous all year round, and they're such a great foundational plant for your garden. That is why I love them. When you grow or garden in a colder region, it is such a staple to have something that will provide winter interest. And this mugo pine here is hardy in USDA growing zones 2 through 8. They're super hardy, down to negative 50 degrees Fahrenheit. It is a slow grower, getting to be 3 to 5 feet tall and 6 to 10 feet wide. And anytime that you see sizes of plants on tags, that is usually the average 10-year size. They have some really pretty new trees in stock, and some of these are Monrovia, and then they also have some in the house brand containers. But this is one that I see every year, and it is a stunner. This is another type of magnolia. It's the black tulip magnolia by Monrovia. It likes full sun, dramatic accent, and early blooms. $131 for this one. It looks like a 5-gallon, but you can see by the dimension of this caliper that it's a pretty mature specimen, and it has already bloomed for this season, so you would have to wait until next year to see it bloom. But it gets to be, it looks like 15 to 20 feet in height and 6 to 10 feet in width. So it's really a great size for most gardens, and it's moderately growing. Hardy in zones 5 through 9 or down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. This is a real beauty. They also have a gorgeous variety of a weeping Japanese maple, the Crimson Queen. It is a classic, large, low-growing, weeping, red-leaved Japanese maple. You often see it as a front landscape specimen plant, and it is really pretty. And when these are mature, they go for big money. This one here is $474. It looks like it's in about a 10-gallon container, and it likes full to part sun, and you can see the shape there. It actually gets pretty wide over time, and it is a really makes a statement. It grows to be about 10 feet tall and wide in natural form. Hardy in zones 5 through 8 or down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And look at this beauty, a European white birch. Now what's great about birches is that they can also tolerate pretty moist soil, and they also get peeling bark, so they provide winter interest. And the leaves on this one is really beautiful. So they like full sun, they have dramatic fall color, they usually turn a beautiful shade of yellow, and it grows in a vase shape, this one. It looks like it gets about 20 feet wide, 35 feet in height, and very hardy, down to negative 50 degrees Fahrenheit, zones 2 through 7. It even says here, it says keep soil moist to wet. I have a Heritage River birch, and I put it in a wet spot, and it's actually doing really well. So that's another plant that can tolerate that type of condition. And this really cool specimen here is a dwarf globe blue spruce, and it's grown in a standard shape. And anytime that you hear the word standard, it just means that it's been grown into a tree shape or lollipop shape. And it has the most beautiful blue color. I absolutely love blue spruces. I think they provide a lot of interest in the garden. And if you're starting a new garden space or even redoing one, if you add a blue component, something yellow, green foliage, and of course red foliage, it instantly looks like you know what you were doing, and your garden looks so put together and provides visual interest, right? So this variety here is by Monrovia. It says it likes full part sun. Now anytime that you have a blue or yellow evergreen, you are going to get the best color in full sun. And it says it's easy care. Now the size on these is going to vary because you can prune it to size control it. It's essentially already been pruned and shaped this way, so you just want to keep that going if you want to keep it to a certain shape and size. And they're very hardy, down to negative 50 degrees Fahrenheit or zones 2 through 8. Now this one would be an investment piece at $210, but because it's taken someone a really long time to grow this shrub to this size so that they could limit up into a standard form, that is what you're paying for, the time and maturity of this specimen tree. And speaking of standard forms, here are some Rose of Sharon that we saw in our last visit. They have the white chiffon by Proven Winners as well as the lavender chiffon. Now these will bloom later in the summer, so if you want to add some late season interest, these would be a great option. And the flowers are really beautiful. They look like little rosettes. Now this is the lavender chiffon, and it is hardy in zones 5 through 9 or down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And they get to be 8 to 12 feet tall, 4 to 6 feet wide. It is long blooming with double flowers. And look at that one, it's in bloom. Isn't that so pretty? Gorgeous. Looks like a rose bush. And then the white one is just a solid white, but also with that ruffled double flower. And it gets to be the same size, 8 to 12 feet tall, 6 to 10 feet wide. Hardy zones 5 through 9 are down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit, and it likes sun. And these here are, let's see how much, $69.98, and they're in a 5-gallon container. And some really pretty bare root roses. This is a pretty affordable way to get roses, and because the root ball is pretty small, they'll be easier to plant as well. And it looks like most of the varieties are true bloom, and they also have some knockout varieties. Now this one here is one that I'm tempted by every year, the Princess Charlotte de Monaco. It has the most beautiful ruffly rose that looks like a peony, and it also smells amazing from what I hear. It's fragrant. You can see it says that there. And it is $19.98. All of these are $19.98. It is a hybrid tea rose, and it gets to be 5 to 5.5 feet in height and 2 to 3 feet in width. It says water regularly until established. Roses in general, after they're established, they don't need a ton of water. 1 to 2 inches a week, and they want a lot of sun. So don't give them too much water, give them plenty of sun, and they'll be happy. I find that they're ones that the less love you give them, the better they do. If you take too much good care of them, they start to get yellow leaf, black spot. Ask me how I know. That's usually what happens to my roses. But they have some really pretty ones down here as well. So this one's called Rose Parfuma Bliss. It looks like a very light peachy color. And the Sunbelt Savannah. Some pink double knockouts, which I would probably buy this one as a shrub because they're pretty affordable. These are $19.98, but you can also buy the 2-gallon container for around that price as well. And they're usually a little bit more established, but this is an excellent landscape shrub rose, tough as nails, pretty disease resistant, doesn't give me any trouble, and blooms nonstop for me in my garden from spring, so sometime in May, until our first hard frost in October. They also have the Petite Knockout, which is a red, low-growing, smaller version. And let's see what else. Rose Bolero. This one is supposed to be really fragrant as well. And Sweet Mademoiselle, which I did buy last year in a container. I have it planted in a planter right now until I can figure out where to put it, but it does smell really nice. It also has a really pretty kind of pink coral color. And this one is a really pretty shade of yellow. It's called Rose Romantica Moonlight. Look at that, gorgeous. I wonder how big this one gets. It's also a hybrid tea, and it gets up to 6 feet in height. Top Cream is another really popular one, and it says beautiful fragrance, ideal for bouquets. When it says ideal for bouquets, typically they have long stems. And this one gets to be how big? 6 feet in height, 2 to 3 feet in width. Another really beautiful steely blue evergreen. This is the Blue Star Juniper. This is a low growing evergreen. It's great for the front of a border. Because it is a juniper, it is pretty drought tolerant, and deer leave it alone because it has a little bit of a needle-like prickly texture. So the Blue Star Juniper, because of this color, will want full sun in order to keep this gorgeous blue color. It is a landscape accent shrub. These are $12.98. They're a little bit smaller than a gallon. And they're very hardy. They're down to a zone 4 or negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And size-wise, these only get to be about 3 by 4 in diameter and about 12 to 18 inches in height. I've had about 3 of them planted in my landscape for 12 years, and that's how big they've gotten. So I have personal experience with this one. It's a really great shrub. And they have lots of arborvitae in at the moment, mostly the emerald green. I don't see any of the green giant, but if you are looking to put in a living fence or a privacy screen this spring, there are lots of options to choose from. I did make a video on the key differences between the emerald green arborvitae and the green giant, which I will link below. If you deal with deer in your area, the green giant is more resistant. There's a couple of key differences between the two of them. I will link that video if you want to take a look. But they also have some of these popular North Pole arborvitaes by Proven Winners in stock at the moment. It looks like they're either, they're a 4.5 gallon. I was going to say a 5. 4.5 gallons for $54.98. They look really pretty, planted in mass, as you can see here in the photo. And they get to be 10 to 15 feet tall, 3 to 5 feet wide, and hardy in zones 3 through 8 or down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. You can see right there how they grouped them together in a grouping, and it looks really pretty planted like that. And of course, winter interest. I also have some of these DeGroote's Spire arborvitae. These are actually really cool because at the top, they'll end up with 3 points. So it almost looks like you have a cluster of arborvitae planted, but it's just one tree. And they're pretty narrow growing too. They like full sun and they get to be 12 feet high, 8 feet wide, hardy down to a zone 3 or negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And these are $59.98. If you do plan on putting up a living fence, they do have bulk pricing here at Lowe's. So you'll save 10% if you buy 16 or more of any combination. So instead of $59.98, you would pay $53.98. And every spring we find some special buy shrubs here at Lowe's. So here are the racks of those. They are $9.98 and $8.98. And let's see what varieties they have. Some boxwood. Of course, these are great for containers, for hedging, or even for playing around with topiary. The deer leave them alone because some of them have a fragrance that they don't like, and they can take part sun to shade. These are one of the very few evergreens that can actually take part sun to shade. So the variety that they have is the Green Mountain Boxwood, and these get to be 4 to 5 feet in height, 2 to 3 feet in width, and they need to be planted 2 to 3 feet apart. And that is a great option for a hedging type boxwood. They are hardy down to a zone 5 or negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit. And they are on special buy for $9.98 each. So a great price to do a hedge with. They have some PJM rhododendrons for $8.98. Now this one has smaller foliage than the big leaf rhododendrons. They also bloom a lot sooner. And because the leaves are smaller, when they're in bloom, you just see a huge puff of flowers because the foliage isn't as noticeable. So these also like part sun. Rhododendrons, azaleas, they're understory shrubs, which means they like to grow under the shade or the canopy of larger trees. So they want to be protected from that scorching hot afternoon sun. They do a lot better that way. And they flower in spring, like I said, this PJM variety a little bit earlier than some of the big leaf rhododendrons. They're also pretty compact, getting to be only 5 feet in height, 5 feet in width. And they're hardy to a zone 4 or negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Great price on these for only $8.98. Rhododendrons in general are also pretty slow growers. The deer, they won't eat the foliage, but if they catch the buds that are getting ready to swell and bloom, you should spray them with deer repellent. At least that's what I found in my garden. And they have this one also for special buy at $8.98. It is the purple gem rhododendron, and this one has a gorgeous dark kind of reddish foliage. And it likes part sun. It gets to be only 2 by 2 in size, so pretty compact, hardy to a zone 4 or negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Grows more in like a mounding habit. So we saw the Green Mountain Boxwood, but they also have the Green Velvet Boxwood on this $9.98 special buy. And these containers are a pretty good size. They're either a 1 gallon or just above. Again, they like part sun. Now this variety, the Green Velvet, grows more in like a mounded or rounded shape, but you can see this one's been clipped into a round ball. They get to be 3 to 4 feet in height, 3 to 4 feet in width. And they are hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit or a zone 4. They're also deer resistant. Another beautiful rhododendron. This one is by Monrovia. You can see how large these bloom buds are. These are deer candy. So this is what I was talking about. You'd want to get home and spray those to make sure that you get to enjoy these beautiful blooms. And this variety looks like you get a variation of pink, and it is called the Holden's Pink Flare Rhododendron. It likes part sun, great for woodland gardens, spring blooms, and $46.98. Looks like maybe a 2 gallon container. It likes part sun, a moist but well-draining soil, and it is hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit or zones 5 through 8. And it says that it reaches 3 to 4 feet tall and wide in 8 years, but can get up to 6 feet wide with age. It's a real pretty one. Really interesting evergreen. If you want like a standalone, a specimen type evergreen, this would be a great option. It's called the Hollywood Juniper, and look at that funky shape it grows in. I love evergreens like this that are a little bit out of the norm, right? They're interesting when you look at them because you don't see them all the time. And this one likes full sun. Because it is a juniper, it's going to be pretty drought tolerant once established and pretty deer resistant. $28.98 for this container. It looks to be just about a 2 gallon. Says right there, deer resistant. They get to be 15 feet in height, 10 feet in width, and they're hardy to a zone 5 or negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit. The Hollywood Juniper. And another really great evergreen that grows in a round or sphere shape is the Mr. Bowling Ball arborvitae. So unlike boxwood that you would have to prune to keep in that round shape, you do not have to do that with these. They naturally grow in this rounded habit, and it likes full sun. This variety here gets to be 24 to 30 inches in height and in width, and it is hardy to a zone 3 or negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. $32.98 for these 2-gallon containers. And another gorgeous yellow evergreen. This one is in a tree form, and it's a Feeling Sunny Deodar Cedar. Has kind of a weeping habit, really pretty color, and it is $147. It looks like it's in a number 5-gallon container by Monrovia. It has a traditional pyramidal shape, and it gets to be, it looks like 12 to 15 feet tall if a leader forms, and up to 8 feet wide. It eventually gets taller with age. All evergreens, if happy, will continue to grow, and it is hardy in zone 7 through 9, 0 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a real pretty one. Another beautiful evergreen. This is a Monrovia Weeping Norway Spruce. I have one of these in my garden. It is gorgeous. And because it weeps, it takes up a small footprint, which means it doesn't take up a lot of space. So you can pretty much tuck it anywhere. $137, not a bad price. It looks to be about a 5-gallon container or so. And it says that it's a dramatic accent, easy care plant. These are super low care, easy. The deer don't touch it. They do like full sun. It says part to full sun. Hardy in zones 2 through 8, so very hardy, down to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. You can see it has that weeping habit, and they get to be 8 to 12 feet tall in staked form. So these are staked, and like I said, they will weep downward, so they take up less of a footprint. Very pretty evergreen. Another really pretty early season blooming shrub. This is Japanese Andromeda, also known as Pyrrhus, and the variety is Valley Rose. It gets a really gorgeous light pink bell-shaped bloom, similar to what you see here. I actually have this one in my garden and I love it. It is so low maintenance, low fuss, blooms early. The deer stay away from it. It likes a moist but well-draining soil and part sun to shade. I have mine in a pretty part sun location. It does really well. I do find that after they bloom, if you give it some fertilizer, something like a holly tone, they bloom a lot better the following year. And if you want to clean up the old blooms, right after they're done blooming and they start drying out, that is the time to go back and prune them before they start putting on the blooms for the following year. Look how pretty that looks when it's in bloom. These come in so many different colors. I've seen red ones, white ones. This variety is pink, and also sometimes the new growth will be different shades of red and pink on the foliage. So all in all, a really great shrub. And this one here is $28.98 in the Lowe's house brand container. It's just about a 2-gallon, and it is hardy to a zone 4 or down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit, deer resistant. I can vouch for that. They are planted in my woodland area and the deer do not touch them. This variety gets to be 5 feet height, 5 feet width, hardy to a zone 4 or negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And look at this beautiful spring color. This is heather, also a really early spring bloomer. In fact, it might even start blooming in late winter. This variety is the Kramer's Red Heather, and it is an evergreen shrub. So you do have these green needles that get a bit darker in the winter months and a bit more green during the spring and summer. And then you'll get these gorgeous blooms all along the stems. And they stay pretty compact. So they bloom in spring and winter. They like full sun, and they get to be, let's see here, 15 inches in height, 24 inches in width, hardy to a zone 6 or down to 0 degrees Fahrenheit. And they are deer resistant. I actually don't have any of these yet in my garden. I haven't found the perfect spot for them, but I'm getting close because they are so pretty. They're also a great candidate to use in containers. So you can actually use these in a container in spring and then plant them out in the landscape. I actually love to do that with perennials this early in the season. They also come in white. So this is the White Perfection Heather. And you can see that this one is a bit more green, but it's starting to get lots of its white blooms. And if you didn't get a chance to plant any spring blooming bulbs last fall, here's your chance. They have these potted up daffodils for $7.98, and you get quite a few of them. You can either use these in containers or in the landscape, but even if you use them in containers, you can then plant them in the landscape, and they're perennial. And the good thing is that over the years, you will get more because they naturalize, so they spread. So it's a great investment. So $7.98, these are the traditional trumpet daffodils in a yellow color. And they're deer resistant, nothing touches them. So all in all, a great spring bulb. And these gorgeous red barked trees are a Japanese maple called the coral bark Japanese maple. Such beautiful winter interest. And it grows these chartreuse green leaves, so it still has a pretty green foliage. Even though they're green, they have a hint of yellow to them, so they're more interesting than just a flat green. But the real interest in this is in this gorgeous red color that you get in the winter months. So these are $179. They're gonna want a full to partial shade, and it says dramatic fall color, eye-catching accent, and they get to be about 15 to 25 feet in height, 15 to 20 feet wide. In general, Japanese maples are a medium-sized tree, so that's about the average size. And they're hardy in zones 5 through 8 or down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. They're starting their spring sales on mulch as well. So if you're in need of mulch, now's a great time to do it before it gets too busy and we want to be planting things instead. So 4 for $10 for their 2 cubic foot Stay Green bags. I'm a sucker for a good evergreen, so I am going to go ahead and pick up this Feeling Sunny Deodar Cedar. And of course, I absolutely love hellebore, so I'm going to grab 2 of these. I didn't get them last year, so this is the time to do it. I really like the variegated foliage, and they're so pretty. I picked 2 that still had lots of buds on them, so I can plant them out and enjoy them for longer in my garden. Well, I showed you the 2 beautiful hellebore that I was picking up, along with the Feeling Sunny Deodar Cedar. I also picked up this really pretty yellow rhododendron. I could not resist. It's the Monrovia one. It's called the Hotai rhododendron. And I'm gonna get that planted and make sure that I spray these buds for the deer. And I also picked up one of these really cool junipers, the Hollywood juniper. So I hope that you've enjoyed checking out what my Lowe's has in stock, and I hope that you can find some of these varieties near you. Thank you for spending your time with me, and I'll catch you in the next one.